Welcome back, everyone, to Your Purposeful Life podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Starks, and it is here where we're helping you shape your purpose your way. Today is episode 118, and we are reflecting on the purpose of my last three guests. That is Carmen Micsa, Colliver, and Michelle Starr. Before I get into this beautiful reflection of these three guests and what they brought to the show with their purposes, I would like for you to first make sure you have this podcast downloaded onto any podcast platform of your choice. Go to our website, yourpurposefullife, and it is there where you can scroll down and join our YPL community. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, click that notification bell like you mean it with a purpose, like, comment, and share. Today's episode is a very special one. I've done one of these before. I believe it was episode 114, I believe. You may have to go back and check that one out. But I've done a Starks Speaks. And the reason why I choose to do this type of episode is because, as I mentioned before, knowledge without applying it in our lives, without any action, is just knowledge. But when we take the knowledge that we've been given from people who have walked the path that we're walking, then we can become more powerful in our decision-making processes. And we can also minimize the mistakes and maximize the opportunities. So it's so important for us to not just listen and say, that's right, and then move on to the next thing of information because there's so much out there, but to really think about what we have learned, how we choose to apply it, where we're going to apply it, and why. Today's episode is special because you're going to hear some insight from me about each guest that I didn't share with them while I was interviewing them because it's about them during that time. With this episode, now I'm going to talk about the first guest. This is Carmen Micsa. Carmen Micsa was episode 115, and that was called Why It's Important to Reinvent Ourselves. What happens when we reinvent ourselves? Well, Carmen Micsa explains a lot about that. When I first read her bio, what really attracted my attention about Carmen was the fact that she was called the Renaissance woman. And right there, I knew I wanted her on this show. I love the idea of the Renaissance period and how it all started, and this birth of artistry across Florence, Italy is absolutely amazing. I actually went there in 2018 and experienced the great Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Carmen Micsa was very interesting because she has such a wide range of what she's good at doing, which is why they call her the Renaissance woman. She's an avid marathon runner, a real estate agent. She also raps. She's an avid tennis player. We had a big conversation about that, and I want you to go and listen to that episode. That's 115 to learn more about her background in tennis. But her story was so powerful and how her purpose came to be. Carmen Micsa grew up in Romania. And during that time, there was a Romanian movement, the revolution, that she was a part of with her father against communism. And this actually helped her to see how when you put your mind to something, when you stand behind something that's meaningful to you, change can happen. This gave her a sense of resiliency that she uses to this day in all of her fields of endeavors, which does not surprise me that she is so successful in what she does. We had a lot of fun laughs on this episode. She talked about the power of serenity, being calm, being happy with where we are in our lives by expressing ourselves through multiple avenues of things. We've been taught, have a niche in something, get really good at something, nail it down, and just focus on that. But what we're learning from Carmen is that you can be really good at multiple things and still be just as successful. You just have to know if your passion aligns with it. With this conversation with Carmen, she actually encouraged me to express myself more in things I'm passionate about, things I have put away for a while, because I thought that if I just focused on one thing, that's all I needed to do. But what I realized is that when we ignore those things that are deep within us, that are calling to us to express those things, we put away a side of ourselves. We ignore a part of ourselves. And that can come across as frustration, anxiety, fear, resentment, that big R word, resentment. because we are not taking the responsibility of doing more for ourselves and having more fun and exploring different avenues to see where we are good, where we can let our purposes shine a little bit more. Carmen brought that to the table, amongst a lot of other things. She's also a writer. To learn more about Carmen, I want you to go and listen to episode 115. Within that episode, I do have show notes where you can click on, learn more about what she's doing with her rapping, because I think that's quite awesome. She's also on Medium, which is a writing platform where she shares a lot of her works. And to go also learn more about what she's doing in her communities to help others find homes and to help others find the houses of their dreams. Carmen is indeed a Renaissance woman. And I'm so happy to have her to be a part of the YPL community. And I'm excited to have her on again. Now let's dive into episode 116 with Don Colliver. And this one's called Let Loose and Clown Around a Bit to Become a Better Speaker and Effective Communicator. What attracted me most about Don Colliver was his title. What I noticed was the fact that he was a past professional clown and blue man. Automatically, I was like, Don has to be on the show. I don't get too many guests with that kind of title. The blue man part really attracted me too, because that's been one of my favorite groups growing up. I was very interested to know how that played out into professional speaking. When this conversation, Don starts right off, guy out of Detroit. And so he knows all about the work ethics, what it takes to grind it out, to put effort in, to put effort forth, to do things, to create. He shares his story of what that turning point was. I always call the human mess, something that causes us to say, no, I need to change something. And that becomes the process. To learn about that story, I'm not going to reveal it here because I want you to hear it in that episode. Go back to episode 116 and he'll share that with you. But there was a moment where Don discovered himself doing an improv class. And he realized this was a passion of his that led him into the pathway of being a professional clown with Cirque du Soleil and also being a professional blue man. He found a way to blend the two together to come up with his own style and creativity. And with that process, he began to learn more about his power to affect an audience. And here it goes. That purpose turned into him now being called to companies like Google and other places around the world to help them learn how to be better presenters by having clown presence. Don makes it very clear that clown presence doesn't mean acting like a clown, but it does mean having the energy of one. And how he expresses that is quite genius. I want you to go back to that episode and listen to it, episode 116. What also gave me the chills about Don was his idea of purpose, and that is to serve people, to help them become better. I thought that was quite fascinating. A person who entertains actually wants someone to become better through that entertainment. So it's not about him, it's about how he's making people feel. And what he taught me is that when we express ourselves openly, with more vulnerability, that energy can come across in a way that's very enduring, that can actually help make massive change in someone's life. And that as a presenter, even for me as a speaker, it's not about me. It's about my audience. It's about how I'm affecting my audience. And it's not about me just telling them something. It's about me sharing something with them, sharing an experience. So Don helped me to let loose, to be a little more free. And that's what I'm doing here in this episode. I don't have a lot of notes with me. I'm going off the top of my head because this is natural. So Don, I want to thank you for helping me loosen up a little bit, clown around a little bit, be a little funny, and also share that side of me that the audience needs to connect to. Last but not least, Michelle Starr, episode 117. Be Brown Brave for Women of Color in Workplace Culture. First off, Michelle's last name, Starr, attracted me. I knew right then and there I wanted her on my show to shine. But what Michelle brought to this show was just not someone talking about inclusion and diversity. What she brought to the show was the power of the understanding of putting inclusion and diversity into action. There's a lot of places out here that will say they have inclusion going on and diversity. That's great. But what happens when I walk to your front door? Will I see that right away, or do I have to go searching for it? If I do see it right away on the front line, will I see it in the higher echelons of command? Most likely, I won't. And that's what Michelle is talking about. This idea of not leaving out women of color. They're hidden in the background. They're there, but they're not being shown how to be higher, or they're not being noticed, and they're not being acknowledged. And Michelle is not just speaking this, she's speaking from experience. And there was an incident with the CEO of a company that she shares very eloquently in this podcast that made my jaw drop. And this was the reason or the purpose behind driving the Be Brown Brave. At that point, Michelle said, I am done. I've tried, but something has to change on my end. And that's what that purpose was for her. She also shares the idea of not just pointing fingers, but finding solutions, partnering with each other, not saying that you're doing this wrong or doing that wrong, but how can we be better together? And Michelle had a fascinating way of not throwing anybody under the bus. And it's so easy to do that. She was so good about saying what the problem was, but at the same time, she understood that sometimes the problems go unnoticed because there's so many other things going on. And that's what I truly admired about her, was her willingness to say, it may not be their entire fault, but we still need to address it. Michelle's ability to be able to bring people together and talk about this problem of women of color in the workplace not getting equal opportunities, not being able to go higher in the echelons of command is actually serious business. She shares stats. She has a TEDx talk on this, and I put that link in the show notes of the podcast so that you can go and watch it. So I know a lot of you probably were saying, yeah, we hear about inclusion, we hear about diversity all the time. Everyone says that. It's kind of a buzzword. That's the problem. It's a buzzword. It's not an action word. And Michelle is trying to put that buzzword into action. She is the North Star of where we need to go for that solution. So I give Michelle high praise for being able to step up and speak out and to help others do the same. And what I learned from Michelle is that we're all in this together. Yes, it's called Be Brown Brave for women of color, but what she means by Be Brown Brave is to be brave for people of color. She means that you can be brave, you can be courageous, you can be that helping hand, and you can be the one that can tell others that this needs to change. This is what we can do better. Use your influence to make that change. Michelle was truly a star on the show, and she shined so bright. And she showed me through purpose that we need to speak up. We need to work together, and we need to be confrontational, but not in a disrespectful way, but in a way that probes the question, what can we do better? Michelle, was wonderful having you on the show. With those 3 episodes, there's a lot to digest and take in. I would encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes. Take notes. Write down questions that you may have. In the video section of that episode, let me know how you're feeling, what your thought process is, what questions you may have for me or the guest. And if you want, what will happen is we'll bring the guest back on a forum and we'll have a Q&A, and we can go deeper into that conversation. It's a wonderful thing to have information at the tip of our fingers, but it's more powerful when we can use that information for constructive change in our lives. Purpose is indeed different for everyone, but purpose, when we use it right, it allows us to create massive change on the planet, and it allows us to help others become better. I love to reflect on my guests because each guest comes to me in a different way. Energetically, I align with them. Something about them interests me to the point to have them on the show. And I cannot have a show and not reflect on my guest because they all mean something very special to me. I want to thank you all for being a part of this YPL community, being a part of this episode, and to be on the lookout for the next episode coming out. Make sure you have this podcast downloaded on any podcast platform. Subscribe to this podcast on our YouTube channel, Your Purposeful Life with Adrian Starks. Until then, wishing you a wonderful and purposeful week.